I've been asked to introduce not only Congressman Wolf, but also the topic for the evening. However, Congressman Frank Wolf needs no introduction. We know him as having been our congressman for 34 years here in the 10th District, which makes him the longest serving congressman in Virginia's history. We remember his distinguished career that is characterized by his clear voice in defense of religious freedom and human rights. We know he's documented with his own eyes the suffering caused by corrupt governments, war, AIDS, and famine in countries such as Ethiopia, Sierra Leone, Rwanda, and most strikingly in the Darfur region of Sudan. It comes as no surprise to his constituents that he worked diligently to call attention to human rights abuses and religious persecution in places such as Tibet, the People's Republic of China, Romania, Bosnia, and throughout the Middle East. So Congressman Wolf needs no introduction, so I won't give one. But I would like to introduce the topic for the evening. Evil exists in this world. Darkness is attempting to corrupt and oppress humankind throughout the world, and we've been particularly aware of this fact for the last 15 years. So how do you combat darkness? Well, God uses light. He shines light on the abuses that darkness inflicts on those who are patiently suffering. He shines light into the lives of oppressed men and women so they can be patient, so they can be beacons of patient light. In August of last year, 2 priests from the Church of Nigeria, Anglican Communion, came to Washington, D.C. to testify to the abuses that they have witnessed at the hand of that darkness that we know all too well. They came to testify to the extraordinary strength and perseverance of those who are beacons of patient love, and they brought their testimony to Frank Wolf, a man they know who listens to the cries of those who are patiently suffering. On August 3rd of last year, Congressman Wolf received these 2 men at the 21st Wilberforce Initiative, where he is now the Distinguished Senior Fellow. He listened intently to the descriptions of rape, murder, kidnapping, arson, and extortion, all firsthand accounts, that these 2 Christian leaders outlined, and Congressman Wolf asked questions. Congressman Wolf expressed empathy, and you could see in his eyes that a plan was beginning to gel in his brain. When the young priest had finished this testimony, the congressman took a deep breath. He leaned forward, exhaled slightly, and then began to speak. We're going to go to the north of Nigeria. We're going to take a team there to detail these atrocities for the Congress and the State Department. We're going to hire a professional video crew to document this brutality and bring it to the people of the United States. We're going to put it on YouTube. And he said it, and you could see in his eyes that he meant it. Funding was found, a security team was assembled. This was a dangerous trip. Research was conducted and the staff was briefed, and they went, and thank God they returned. Tonight, Congressman Frank Wolf would shed light on the darkness that's spreading throughout the Lake Chad region of Africa, and particularly in Nigeria. Perhaps awareness of this horror will bring about action to stop it. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you a man who was called the conscience of the United States Congress, a champion of those religiously oppressed, Frank Wolf.
Well, thank you very much, Will, and thank you for the introduction, and thank all of you. I told my wife, I don't know how many people will be here, but it's a good crowd, and thank you all for coming, and I'm honored to be connected to Ronald Reagan. As many of you know, I lost my first 2 times, and on the 3rd time, there was this guy named Ronald Reagan running, and I grabbed his coattails, and he pulled me straight across. And my wife will tell you, I'm always saying, if we only had a Reagan, and so it's good to be here join the Ronald Reagan Association. I will briefly and quickly go through some of the recommendations and some of what we saw, and then we have some video that we took, and then I'll take some questions. This is probably one of the most difficult places. Our group, founded by Randall Everett from Texas, we issued a report on June 9th. Will was there when we rolled out the report. And last week we brought two people into America. One is one of the mothers of one of the Chibok girls who still is missing. In fact, last week was her birthday. And we also brought another lady who runs a school in that region, but she doesn't want to be named. We arranged our itinerary really with local people. We did not deal with our State Department. The State Department has a policy you can't go certain places, certain times, so we kind of wanted to be freelance and go wherever the people kind of wanted us to go and to see. We joined a group called the Stephanos Foundation. You'll see a little bit about them. And they took us in many different places. We went up through the Middle Belt where the people have been ravaged with Boko Haram, and also another group called the Fulanis, which I had heard a little bit about, but really, I must say, not very much about, which I will talk a little about. We met with people from 9 of the states, the northern states, who came in to be with us and tell us. Most of the time was spent in Jos, where a lot of the attacks have taken place, and out in the Middle Belt region. We listened to hundreds. We met with almost 500 people we went in remote areas far off of the main road. We talked to tribal leaders, pastors. Let me just say, the faith of the people and the faith of the pastors is incredible. It is incredible. You would think they would be sort of, they're not. Their faith is, I think, in stronger than I have seen perhaps in most other places. We heard about the pain, the suffering, the agony in northern and central Nigeria. They generally felt that the world has sort of forgotten them. And the title of our report, we're passing out something Patricia has in the brochure called Fractured and Forgotten. Nigeria is fractured. I'll try to talk as to why it has an impact on all of us, not just from a kind of historical point of view, but what it actually means to all of us. Corruption is all over, from the airport to I could tell you stories which I won't get into, but corruption is all over. There were just 12 generals, if you looked at the AP report 2 or 3 days ago, who have been indicted. Everywhere you go, Transparency International ranks Nigeria 136th out of 168 countries with regard to corruption. Given their population size, the cost of this injustice takes a tremendous toll on the average person. Poverty is all over, despite the fact that according to the latest World Bank figures, they're the wealthiest nation in Africa, but the poverty rate is unbelievable. It's immense poverty, immense unemployment. The number of people that live on $1.90 a day is unbelievable. Everywhere we went, poverty. And so while they have all the oil coming from the South, you almost have 2 different countries, the South has very little to do with the North, but tremendous poverty. Terrorism. According to the 2015 Global Terrorism Index, more than 51% of all global deaths attributed to terrorists were committed by Boko Haram. Boko Haram, as you may very well know, has signed an agreement, pledged an allegiance to ISIS. Nigeria has had the largest increase of terrorist deaths than any other country of the world. 9 of the top 20 of the most fatal attacks in 2014 occurred in Nigeria. The deadliest terror organization in the world are number one is Boko Haram. Number 2 is ISIS. And keep in mind they have pledged their allegiance to ISIS, and there's a connection now with ISIS. Number 3 is Al-Shabaab, which is in Somalia. And number 4 is a group that I had only heard a little bit about, and that's the Fulani militant herdsmen, who have, in essence, they're the 4th most dangerous terrorist group in the world. So Nigeria, a country of 180 million, has the 1st, who's pledged allegiance to the 2nd, and they have the 4th. A little bit about Boko Haram. Boko Haram is all over the Middle Belt. What Boko Haram means is Western education is forbidden. I think if you dig in, you will find that the Saudis helped years ago with regard to the original founder of Boko Haram. Everywhere you go, we were in Nigeria last year, and we were out in these camps, and every meeting I went to, I said, who is helping ISIS? And the name that came up in literally every meeting was the Saudis. Back to Nigeria, according to the Global Terrorism Index of 2015 from the Institute of Economics and Peace at the University of Maryland, Boko Haram killed 6,664 Nigerians in 2014, more than all the people killed by ISIS. That makes Boko Haram the most deadly terrorist group in the country. They have killed roughly, since their beginning, probably where they really began to take off, 2011, 2012, over 20,000 people. They have declared war now against both our government and against the Nigerian government. So you can see Boko Haram attacks villages. We went in villages where they burn the villages, they kill the pastors, they conduct drive-by shooting, they use young girls as suicide bombers. They particularly go after clerics and any symbol of Western advancement, schools, hospitals, churches, and even mosques. Well, no one has the exact number, thousands. We just hear about the Chibok girls, but thousands of girls have been kidnapped. According to the Washington Post a couple of weeks ago, young girls who have been raped and released by Boko Haram are stigmatized. They're actually the victims twice. They're the victims when they're captured and taken, and then they're the victims when they're released because a village will not take them back. The fear is they will have been radicalized, and so therefore they are not welcome back in many areas. Just last month, we had, in April 14th, we had the 2-year anniversary of the kidnapping of the Chibok girls. And despite the loud protests in the West, remember hashtag Bring Back Our Girls, Mrs. Obama did it, Cameron did it, only one has actually come back, and she didn't really come back. She was found walking in a village with her husband, who was a Boko Haram person, and so she was not really rescued. In essence, the day they were captured, there were 267. 67 jumped out, ran away. 200 were captured. Of the 200, only one has come back. Now, it's counterintuitive. The hashtag Bring Back Our Girls has really not helped. It's almost hurt, because what it has done now, it has made these Christian girls almost a bounty, something that they want to hold because they know the world. Mrs. Obama did hashtag Bring Back Our Girls. Remember that Sunday morning radio address? Cameron did, the movie stars did, everyone. So, and one counselor we spoke, and I'm going to use really careful language here. One counselor, when we were in an area who counsels the people who are counseling the women, said, one, they may never return without a major concerted effort by the Nigerian government and our government. There's something strange here. I mean, for those of you who've been in the military, you understand. I mean, I've been out at different places at times where I could see, I would be on a place and I would see a drone going over, and we were watching a house, and you could literally see the people's faces, you could see them coming out of the buildings, you could see the license plates. I cannot believe that we cannot find these girls. I cannot believe it, and yet it's been over 2 years. What this counselor said is, they're basically saying to the mothers, one, Your daughter may never come back unless there's a major effort. But secondly, she will have been the victim of sexual violence over a number of times. Also, she will be either pregnant or with child, and if you notice, the one 2.5 weeks ago had a young 4-month-old baby, and all your daughters will have been forced to convert to be a Muslim. And of course, the girl that was picked up 2.5 weeks ago had a child, was with a Boko Haram man who was her husband, and had been forced to convert. Forced. I want to stress again, and as many of the people that we talked to, they said the daughters may have, but most of them had very, very strong faith. We then met a lot of people in villages. They would tell us about the Fulanis. The Fulanis are militant herdsmen that I had heard very, very little about. They are not only in Nigeria, but they're in a series of countries across that belt. Very, very violent. They are the herdsmen. They many have been connected to radical groups, and I'll just kind of leave it at that. Some of the herdsmen adhere to a more radical form of Islam, even more so in some respects than Boko Haram. They have had devastating impact on predominantly Christian farming communities. The Global Terrorism Index has identified them, as I said, the 4th most deadly terrorist organization in the group. Well, we were in Nigeria that last week of February. You may remember there was a major attack in a village called Agatu, A-G-A-T-U. There were 200 to 300 people killed. The attack went on for 2 to 3 days. No military came to help the people. Even on YouTube, we have pictures of the Fulani herdsmen on motorized boats. People who were there said that helicopters came in. 2 helicopters came in. So here you have the Fulani herdsmen with helicopters, motorized boats. The attack goes on for 2.5 to 3 days, and no one from the military comes. That's not a settler, cattle rustler, type thing like in the Old West. This is a concerted effort. And there's been an obvious increase in the Fulani attacks. You have up to 5 million internally displaced persons. We went into a lot of internally displaced, they call them IDP camps. They're the worst that I've ever seen. They have nothing. The UN is not there. Almost no one's there. And other than some church groups and doing things. And then you have millions living in other people's homes, but you have roughly 5 to 6 million IDPs who have been forced out of their homes, burned out of their homes, and they have no ability to access any Nigerian government help, UN help, or any other help. There was a recent Refugee International report that came out 2 weeks ago where a senior official was quoted as saying, "Nigeria is our biggest failure." And this aligns with the stories that we heard. We released a report on June 9th. Just to highlight some of the things, we go in deep into Boko Haram, how it started, who started it, where they are, what they have done, how many they've killed. We raise the issue of psychological and social help for the Nigerians. These young women who have been captured and taken away and sexually abused, they need counseling. So what we're recommending is that we send IJM, in our Justice Ministry, as we all know about, who's done a great job in America on sexual trafficking, and Shared Hope and some of these groups to go and train, not to do it themselves, but to train the Nigerians on how to do it. We also have recommended, we were in a prison where we're trying to meet Boko Haram people. Each time they said we could, we got to the prison, we got into prison, and then they would not allow us. But there needs to be some mechanism to counsel and do something with people who are in Boko Haram who have been captured to sort of keep them from going back into the fight. When we would be in villages, I would expect to hear that Boko Haram has done this, Fulani. They would say the military came in and did this, the police came in and did this. So we really need human rights and religious freedom training for the police and for the military. What they're coming in sometime, they'll come into a village, they'll slaughter everyone, then take the remaining people away, put them in a camp, and then they'll say they've captured the village from Boko Haram, when actually what they've done is they've hurt a lot of people that live there and they've destroyed the village. We're asking, one of our major recommendations, which if you go online, you can see the report, is we're asking for a special envoy, one person, similar to what President Bush did with Senator Danforth in Sudan, one person to be a special envoy to advocate for this issue. And I'll give you a reason why we need one, but why it's important to deal with this. We would have a special envoy for Nigeria and the Lake Chad district. It isn't just Nigeria. Cameroon's been impacted. We've been following the military, a number of Cameroon papers. Cameroon soldiers have been killed. Last week, AP had a story. There were 24 Niger soldiers who were killed. So it isn't just Nigeria. It's Cameroon, it's Benin, it's Chad, and if that whole region explodes, and so if you go on the list and see some of the special envoys that this administration has, it's incredible that they will not do this. So we are asking, our report pushes, and we're doing a letter to the president and the secretary urging that they put a special envoy to kind of deal with this issue. We have a major interest there. There are 180 million people. You're going to see some of the scenes, and I'll be moving into that. There are 180 million Nigerians. 180. One prominent Nigerian said Nigeria is fragile. He said if the 180 or portion of them are displaced, they will devastate Africa, they will devastate Europe, and they will have a major impact on the business interests of the United States. And he said it will not be violence-free. Obviously, it will not be violence-free. Bono, the Irish rock star, singer, said about a month ago, he said, the unraveling of Nigeria is an existential threat to all of Europe. Right now, keep in mind, Nigeria, 180 million people, Boko Haram, the Fulanis, ISIS. Syria, you have 23 million. And look at the impact of the Syrian refugees have had on Europe and many other places, and even beginning to have a little impact here. If Nigeria unravels, the impact on Europe and the impact on the world will be unbelievable. I think one of the biggest mistakes during Secretary Clinton's time as secretary, and nobody's mentioning this really, the FBI, the CIA, and our intelligence services, in addition to the Department of Defense, wanted to designate Boko Haram as a foreign terrorist organization. And for some reason, during Secretary Clinton's time, she would not designate them. Now, to the credit of Secretary Kerry, he has. I believe that had you designated Boko Haram as a foreign terrorist organization, then much of what we're facing and seeing would be different. And I think as this campaign goes on, somebody ought to ask Secretary Clinton, why did you not designate them as a foreign terrorist organization when all of the intelligence and the military apparatus of our government felt that they should? In closing, and I'll take some questions, and we'll go to the film and into questions. Our organization is named the 21st Century Wilberforce Organization. I've always been a fan of William Wilberforce. William Wilberforce was a man of faith who got elected to the Parliament and basically had a conversion, was really influenced by Wesley, but also John Newton, who wrote the Amazing Grace. When Wilberforce was speaking to the British people and to the British Parliament, fighting the slave trade, he once said, "You may choose to look the other way, but you can never again say that you did not know. And quite frankly, what we wanted to do with our report was to go. The embassy isn't going where we went, and I'm not criticizing the embassy. There are a lot of good people in the embassy, and there are a lot of good people in the State Department working on these issues. There are a lot of good people in AFRICOM working on these issues. But if you look at the report and go online, you'll see it's very, very comprehensive, very, very nonpartisan, very, very straightforward. But the impact of allowing this thing to unravel, and the American people, particularly the American government, cannot now say that they do not know. If you can then show the film, and then if I see something, I'll just point out who it is, but I think most of it will be self-explanatory. Maybe we can turn the lights down a little bit. Yeah, thank you.
In northern and central Nigeria, terrorists burn villages to the ground, destroy churches, and mutilate men, women, and children in the name of their God. Discrimination against religious minorities grows. Distrust breeds, and violence goes unpunished. Since 2010, Boko Haram has targeted schools, killing hundreds of students. In 2014, they kidnapped 276 girls from the Chibok school, and almost all are still missing. Fulani militants force Christians from their land, surround their villages, and make them prisoners who cannot leave home without risk of being murdered.
No one will go out of show. Both men or women, children, they kill them straight.
1 million people are in displaced persons camps, and 4 million others, more than the number of people in Los Angeles, are simply displaced. All of this has created one of the world's most neglected humanitarian crises. 21st Century Wilberforce Initiative sent a team to Nigeria to document the atrocities and raise awareness with churches in the West.
We wanted to come here and hear from you what your situation is.
In the presence of the security personnel, our people were caught, were martyred.
We have nowhere to go.
They just entered the city and destroy everything there. So everybody ran away.
We have over 70 Show people hacked down and killed violently.
When the killings took place in Paris, the whole world listened. But when killings are taking place in northern Nigeria, it's just one little blip on the news.
I want to pray for us because I want to peace for my village.
They found that amid all the hopelessness is hope. Leaders such as Reverend Benjamin and Gloria Kawashi, organizations like Stephanos Foundation, and Education Must Continue are standing in the gap. Will you stand with Nigeria? Find out more. Go to standwithnigeria.org.
Foundation is an organization that is out to help victims that are persecuted for either their faith or for their political stands. The name Stephanos is taken from Stephen. He's a Christian personality that at a point in time, because he stood for his faith, he was hated and he was stoned to death. The action of Stephen at that point made us make a choice of this name. There are things that are happening to a set of people because they have chosen to believe and they are willing to stand by their faith. And because of that, they are segregated, marginalized, and persecuted. And these people are Christians. In our world in Nigeria today, it started in 2001. Violence became part of our community, and most of those violence was targeting Christians. And because Christians are motivated by love, they are encouraged to love people. It was going to be very difficult to imagine that the best way to react and respond to violence was to go on with another violence, because it was going to take off their Christian belief and their Christian values. But we saw that the Christians of our time in Nigeria are struggling with that form of response. We felt that if Christians are motivated to respond that way, then they will be losing in two ways. Number one, they may never win physically. They may lose all properties. They may lose even their lives. That's one. Secondly, they may even lose the foundation on which their faith lies. And I think it is the plan of the devil to get Christians in our days to that ground, to lose their faith, to lose their values. And so it is the vision of this organization to work together with Christians to learn at the foot of Stephen what motivated Stephen to be able to pray for his perpetrators and request that God should forgive them. So we are going to work in that way that will help Christians to have the breathing space and pray for their perpetrators and win them even to the same faith that they are hated for. So today, with the support we have, we are operating as a human rights advocacy, relief, rehabilitation, and reconstruction agency. We've gotten serious threats, personally as the founder of this organization. But one thing I know is I should remain focused. No one has a right to take my life. No one has the ability because no one gave me that life. So as long as I live, I was going to do it. It is something worth dying for. So it's a gradual move, but with patience and the will of God, we've been able to get here. Another organization outside there, 21st Century Wilberforce, is interested in knowing what we are struggling with. We know that we always work to attract more support for the sake of the victims we see on the ground. So it was another opportunity to grasp for the sake of the people we're struggling with. We want to pass the picture of what we're seeing on the ground to another caring body out there. And so we set up the advocacy team of the Stephanos Foundation to go around and prepare the minds of the people and mobilize them for the visit of the 21st Century Wilberforce.
I think it's been very humbling to be in the presence of these people who have suffered so much and yet continue to stand so strong. As we traveled across the middle part of northern Nigeria, we saw village after village that was literally burned to the ground. But then when we met with tribal leaders and municipal leaders, pastors, and just victims, we saw an incredible kind of strength and faith and determination that has certainly been an inspiration.
Seeing through their eyes how much we have seen in the past was just like transferring the passion and the weight of these people back to them. And we're hoping that they are going to transfer it to another for a change to come. As a nation, we have to come to a point of understanding that if we must live together as a people, then we have to have regard and respect for one another. And I think that's what translates as human rights. You give everybody his right and dignity, and then they do same to you. Then we can live together happily.
Archbishop Benjamin Kwashi is well known as a preacher and evangelist throughout Nigeria, Africa, England, and the United States. Originally destined for a military career, in 1976, Archbishop Kwashi received a clear vocation to ordained ministry. He was ordained in 1982 and 10 years later became Bishop of Jos. In January 2008, he was presented as the Archbishop of Jos Province in the Church of Nigeria. He worked in rural and urban churches as a polytechnic chaplain and at the theological college. In 1978, his church and vicarage were totally burned down in Christian-Muslim riots. He and his wife Gloria have 6 children and adopted 52 orphans. Archbishop Kwashi has survived 3 attempts on his life. He can speak firsthand of God's grace and power, experienced in the most difficult of situations. The province of Jos covers northeastern Nigeria, which has had numerous outbreaks of religious violence where Christians have been targeted by Islamist militants. The Archbishop has been outspoken and openly critical of the press and the authorities whenever he has witnessed lies and injustice.
We have lost faith in media. Unfortunately, it's fairly obvious that the media, international media, is up against the church, particularly on the plateau. It is not reporting correctly.
Such courage has come at a price, for Archbishop Kwashi has been personally targeted and his wife, Gloria, and son have been badly beaten. On that occasion, Gloria was dragged through the streets to the diocesan offices. She was left blind until an operation in Texas restored her sight. Almost 18 months later, as the family prepared to celebrate Gloria's recovery, 4 young men arrived to kill the Archbishop, who immediately fell to his knees to pray. "Man of God, we have come for you," they said. "This is not a time for prayer." They took him outside, but stopped to negotiate the price of his life. One of them screamed, "I've changed my mind. Let's take him back inside and kill him there." It never happened. They took what money Gloria could find and disappeared into the night. That's something of what contending for the faith has meant for Ben and Gloria Kwashi. North American Bishop Julian Dobbs describes Kwashi as one of the most important and courageous Christian leaders of our generation. In November 2014, after a bombing in Potsdam killed 40 Muslim school children, Kwashi released a statement strongly criticizing the idea that Boko Haram violence was the result of poverty. Kwashi said it was important that the issues of poverty, corruption, and extremist violence should not be conflated and confused.
The message for the Christian community in Nigeria in these days is that they should look up to God. There is hope. Prayers is the only key. Crying out to God to turn the hearts of the persecutors and to cause governments to act justly on behalf of all people, regardless of their religion or their creed. Prayers that God will spare children and bring hope in the midst of almost hopelessness. Prayers that those who believe in Christ may never give up, but hold on to the faith. This is our plea.
Initiated by the Education Must Continue initiative, the Displaced Persons School is a free center for learning for children. The NGO's efforts over the past 1 year has successfully catered for the educational needs of over 788 pupils who were formerly learning under a makeshift tent.
I learned so many things from this school. I learned even how I can protect myself from diseases and how I can do so that I will make my surrounding very healthy.
The story is very exciting as the school held its end of first term session with presentation of prizes to the best performing students and staff. The chairman of the Education Must Continue initiative highlighted achievements and the progress made so far.
When we started the idea of this school, we only thought that we will be providing education to about 50 children. But when the coordinator came out to start setting up the facility for the school, about 800 children turned out.
He added that the success of the IDP school project was purely from investment of personal resources, a donation of a semi-block of 6 classrooms, and additional funds from the Church of the Brethren to procure tarpaulin, classroom desks, and other materials. On behalf of the displaced persons' parents, Thomas Hassan appreciated the NGO for making the environment conducive for learning.
I thank those that initiated Education Must Continue initiative. It has helped the children to forget what has happened in the past.
Whatever happens in the coming years, time may prove this school to have been the turning point in the lives and destinies of these children. Whatever happens, education must continue.
No matter the odds, education must continue. Thank you.
Just a day after the prize presentation in Sangere, the Education Must Continue group proceeded to another of its IDP schools situated in Lassa village, neighboring the fearful terrorist stronghold, Sambisa Forest. Gathering the broken pieces of the community after being ransacked by the dreaded group called Boko Haram, the IDP school established by the Education Must Continue initiative kicked against the group's campaign on abolishing Western education in Nigeria by providing education to these lost ones who have made themselves families under the roof. With the support and personal contribution of the Garzama family. Education Must Continue Primary and Secondary School, we started on 7th October 2015, with 2017 pupils have tremendously increased in numbers and brought unity and hope for the future among the community since its establishment.
It is indeed a great day for now to celebrate this occasion. Speech and prize giving day of Education Must Continue Primary and Junior Secondary School Lassa.
And now, to my surprise, most of them, even the class 1 that we have here, they can read and as well know other studies.
Closing their first term session, teachers, students, parents and friends are celebrating ahead of Christmas.
That pretty much brings you up to speed on where it is. I'll just end with just a couple comments and then take into questions. One, the faith of the people is very, very strong. In fact, as I had two different pastors say when they look at the United States, what is happening? One pastor said, "You evangelized us in 1904, and we looked to see the West." And he covered a couple issues, which I won't get into. He said, "What is happening in the West?" Secondly, the faith of the people is very strong. Bishop Kwashi, who's an Anglican, he's not asking for our help. I think he never did he say, "Can you help us if you don't help us?" They're not begging, they're not seeking. Thirdly, keep in mind the two most dangerous organizations in the world operates in the neighborhood. One night we had dinner with Bishop Kwashi, and he had his son drive in to meet us. It was about 11 o'clock at night, and the roads were just dark. And his wife, bad things happened to his wife. Very, very bad things happened. And he was also beaten. He has, when we were in that one house, he has 50-some kids that are living with him now. Lastly, the impact on the West. Boko Haram, ISIS, allegiance, and if 180 million, the largest nation in Africa, unravels, then the impact in the West, particularly in Europe, but even in the United States, will be unbelievable. And as I travel around the world, now compared to it was during the days of President Reagan, the world just doesn't seem to have the confidence in our country that it used to have. And with regard to Nigeria, I think the one thing every time we would go any place, we would say, what can we do to help? The number one issue they would say, can you pray for us? With that, let me just end and take any questions you may have. Thank you.
If you have any questions, if you can come to the center and make a line here, and we're going to go ahead and do some very brief questions. I'm going to hold the mic as we do so. Please come forward. While he's coming forward, I just want to ask my own personal question. What is the issue with Boko Haram coming to America? Has that been an issue or not?
No, they're not coming to America, but they are allied with ISIS, and ISIS has impact. We just saw what we saw in Orlando, and I think what we may continue to see unless something fairly dramatic is done. I think our government needs to put a strategic policy together on how you defeat ISIS. Quite frankly, right now, we're all over the.
Thank you.
Yeah. Frank, could you tell us what percentage of the 180 million are Christians?
About 51%.
51. And what about conversion from Muslim to Christianity? Is there a lot of conversion?
There are a lot. Some of the people with this had been Muslim before and had converted. There is, as I travel, when we were in Iraq last year, the number of Muslims who are becoming believers, followers of Jesus, is amazing. They are very, very, very open. In fact, it's quite a bit. But even in the north, the traditional feeling is the Christians are in the south and the Muslims are in the north. But the Christian population of the north is 30%, and in some of the villages that we went to, it's 90%. But many of them said, up until certain things happened a few years ago, we got along, Muslims and Christians got along. They were Sufis. They were a very moderate Muslim, and then many people believe, and I don't want to extrapolate too much, that the Saudis got involved. If you look at the involvement of the Saudis around the world, look at the paper yesterday. The Saudis are in Albania. You looked at the New York Times 2 weeks ago. The Saudis are funding mosques in Kosovo. You look what the Saudis are doing. The Saudis fund all of the madrasas up on the Afghan-Pakistan border that led to the Taliban. Mullah Omar went to a Saudi-run madrasa. So the Saudis, and the failure of our government to lay the rule down to the Saudis, quite frankly, is incredible. We have too many former, no offense to any of you people out there if you work for the CIA. I love the CIA. It was in my district. Some of my best friends are there. But we have some former CIA officers who are out working for the Saudis. We have some former big law firms in town, the former government people that there was an article the other day in the paper, former, and I won't mention the names, of people who are a bit on the hill are out now representing the Saudis. The Saudis, and some of the literature that the Saudis have is anti-Semitic and anti-Christian. And so the Saudis have really been a problem. They've been a problem in Iraq. There have been some problems here. But the breakdown is roughly 51% Christian, 49% Muslim. But they did say over and over, we got along well up until a certain time.
You mentioned the colonies, former colonies of France, Cameroon, Benin, Chad, Niger, and of course the French are very active in Mali. They've sent French troops there to fight the Muslims, the radical Muslims. Is there any French involvement in the battles along the border with Nigeria? Are they involved at all? Are there any other countries that are involved by the sending of troops or helping fight or what?
The British are a little bit, not really too much. In Nigeria itself, they are not. We have forces across the border in a certain area that we're advising them. I just can't believe. I mean, our people, for those of you who've been in the military, we have some of the finest people ever in the military. I know that if we were willing to go after and do what we can, we could have found those girls. I mean, a large portion, if you've been to Nigeria, is kind of scraggly brush. You could see there were not deep, bushy jungle areas. Now, up in the Sambisa forest, where they think they are, it is. But I cannot believe. Lastly, and I'm going to say something that's a little controversial, and I don't mean this as criticism. I really don't. Because I think there was a sincere feeling of hashtag bring back our girls. But hashtag bring back our girls doesn't bring them back when you're up against Boko Haram. And I think the very fact, if someone is captured, and then you found that you've captured somebody that's very significant, that the world really cares about, you all must have elevated. And I found that some of the people were a little disappointed because they thought when they saw America and Great Britain saying hashtag bring back our girls, that meant that the full engagement of the United States government was going to be involved. And so I just think, you know, and if you have daughters and you know, so I think we in the West, by heightening that, we then should have followed through with more activity than we did. But I find it hard to believe we were not able to rescue. Now, it could have been the fault of the Nigerian government saying, I don't know. But we have the ability to find and see and do, but we never have.
Hi, Congressman Wolf. Bill Wilkin. Were you able in your visit to Nigeria to make any calls on the Nigerian government or the local governors?
Yes, we were in Abuja and we were in Lagos. We did. Yes, yes.
Your feelings?
I think the new president Buhari, is doing some good things. So I think he's doing some good things. I won't say I'm overly encouraged, but I think it's a more positive thing than Goodluck Jonathan, who incidentally was a Christian, and the current president's a Muslim. But I do think there are some positive things that he's doing, trying to get with corruption. If you look at the AP story, came out on Friday, the indictment of the generals, it's a very difficult situation. So the people that we met, you know, I was impressed with. But corruption is so, I had an experience, I had to quickly get back and I broke away from the group. And I was in the airport by myself, and that day it started out about 6 in the morning and I had a granola bar. When I take these trips, I eat granola bars. I live on granola bars. I am a granola bar advertisement. And people laugh, but I never get sick because I stay with the granola. So I had some water. I had some water and coffee, you can, and a granola bar. We got to the airport. We did. It was a difficult day, and we got to the airport, and a guy grabs my bags, and I sort of pulled him back, but he seemed to want to help me. So I thought maybe he's a generous man. So he's going to help me. So we checked in at the counter, and then he kept holding my bag, and I sort of pulled it back. And then we come to a man dressed in a uniform, looking like he was with the airline. He had a nice tag, and he looks at my boarding pass. I give him my boarding pass. I mean, here we finally have got to the gate. We're going to be, oh no, he says, no. And he just goes on, pretty much telling me, well, a man came to my defense because I said, what do you mean? And he said, no, look at this. Can you believe this? And I didn't know what he was talking about. And a man from South Africa shouted and came up to him and kind of pushed him. And he said, it's a shakedown. He said, what they do is they dress up, they put a tag on, and then they get your boarding pass, and then they run. And then you go after them, and then for $200, $300, $400, $500. And so finally I grabbed it back. We had a tussle with the guy, but corruption is everywhere. And I think Buhari is facing a very difficult time because he's facing a system that has been so corrupt. So overall, I think the current president is an improvement. And I'm not going to say I'm optimistic, but I'm hopeful because all the words that we heard is he's a pretty good person. Time will tell.
Thank you. Congressman Wolf, thank you so much for putting your life in danger and bringing us a story and all. I have a question. The refugee resettlement program that we have here, I was terribly, terribly upset to find out that that the church that I belong to, the Catholic Church, that the resettlement program that they, quite honestly, not just the Catholic Church, but all religious denominations, everybody with charitable outreach, they've been receiving millions, hundreds of millions of dollars over the years, resettling refugees. And when I found out, well, when I asked the question, what percentage of these refugees were Christian, I was shut down pretty quickly at a Catholic meeting. And I spent the next several days trying to find the answer. And Nina Shea from the Hudson Institute basically spilled the beans and told us that out of the thousands and thousands of refugees, that there were 52 Christians that had been resettled in this country over a 5-year period of time. The rest of them were Muslim. And it was terribly upsetting to think that the Christians who've been, they've been, you just showed everything, persecuted like this. And so I guess my question is, what can we do? How can that change? I've gone and I've talked to priests and pastors and all, and it's, I don't know, it's just the way it seems to be, and it just seems to be a money-making machine. That's the only thing I can think of, is that you follow the money, that there's got to be money in it for all of these different religious institutions. You look at what you presented tonight, and I mean, it's heartbreaking. And I don't know. The United Nations is behind all of this as well. They're feeding all of it. How can that be changed? How can any of that make a difference? Yeah.
Well, it can be changed. I agree with Nina. I work with Nina. Nina's really good on these issues. She was on the Religious Freedom Commission, and Nina's done a lot of great work. This administration has not been sympathetic to Christians. Fact is, about 6 or 7 months ago, there were a group of 26 Christians who had crossed the border from Iraq, had crossed the border from Mexico in, gave themselves up, all had relatives in San Diego, and they were put in a holding place and were there for months. Were they still there or not? I don't know. Whereas somebody crossing the border from Mexico gets a little date for a court appearance, they generally don't even show up, and they're given a bus ticket to go wherever they want to. There almost seems to be that if you're a Christian, there's something almost a negative against you. We were in Iraq last year. We were with a Catholic sister, Sister Diana, a beautiful woman. The Syrian Chaldeans in Iraq speak Aramaic. We were with a group of nuns one night for dinner, and they sang the Lord's Prayer in Aramaic, the language of Jesus. They said, Mr. Wolf, does the West care about us? And then he said, Mr. Wolf, does the church care about us as Christians? And the church in the West has been relatively silent on this issue. Pope Francis has spoken out. Cardinal Wuerl's been very, very good. Cardinal Dolan's been very good. Russell Moore's been good. Rick Warren. But other than that, the church in the West has been relatively silent. So the Christians are the ones, we are literally, not to switch the subject, but in Iraq, when the war broke out, there were 1.5 million Christians. Today they're down to 250,000. And there's a Catholic group out of London several weeks ago came out with a report and said, in 5 to 6 years, there will be no Christians left in Iraq. Now, let me just give you a Bible lesson. More biblical activity took place in Iraq than any other country of the world. Abraham's from Iraq. My first trip, I went to Nasiriyah, and the troops took me and said, this is Abraham's village. Ezekiel's buried there. Daniel's buried there. When we were there, we went in a little town called El Kush. They kept saying, you want to see the tomb? The tomb. We were up in the front lines with the Peshmerga. We said, sure, we'll see the tomb. It was Nahum's tomb. The Christians are literally evaporating, and the church in the West, my own church included, has been silent. So the very failure of the West to advocate for the persecuted Christians, and there is a saying in the Middle East, first the Sephardi people, and then the Sunni people. The Sephardi people are the Jewish community. When I was in Iraq, I said, what is the Jewish population now? Because, in 1950, the Jewish population of Iraq was 150,000. They said, Mr. Wolf, roughly 10 elderly individuals. When I was in Egypt 2 years ago, I met with the leader of the Jewish community, and I said, how many Jewish people are left? Because we had stories of them taking over the Jewish cemeteries and the synagogues and squatters. And she said, Mr. Wolf, she said, in 1948, the Jewish population of Egypt was 80,000. She said, now we're down to 20 individuals more or less, and we're all in our 70s and 80s. She said, what has happened to the Jewish community is happening to the Christian community. But I think it's the responsibility, and Nina Shea is right, and for the church not to speak out. I mean, Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, failure to speak is to speak, failure to act is to act. The failure of the church in the West to advocate for everyone, but certainly don't neglect the Christians. But Nina is exactly right. Christians are being neglected. And lastly, Christians in the Middle East are afraid to go into the refugee camps, because I've had them tell me, Mr. Wolf, I'm afraid because there's somebody's in there whose son is in ISIS or somebody else. And so the Christians are being discriminated against over and over, and there's been a silence. Again, there have been exceptions. God bless Cardinal Worrell and Cardinal Dalton. They've been great, Russell Moore and Rick Warren. But overall, the church in the West has been silent. So Nina is exactly right.
This will be our last question.
What is happening to the oil industry and its money?
The oil industry is oil is down. The oil workers are kind of in enclaves down there. All the oil is in the South. Now there's a new group beginning to have attacks against the oil facilities. And they're asking for a greater share. There was a bandito group. So the oil is in trouble. A lot of the American companies are really looking to kind of get out as quickly as they can, but there's a lot of problems. But again, the South is not as bad as the North, but what's taking place with regard to Boko Haram and the Fulani are beginning to move south. But the oil industry is, I mean, they don't live out, most of them, among the general public. They generally live on enclaves where they have protection and they have guards. The last thing is, I would just ask for those of you, everywhere we went, we said, what can we do for you? They said, pray. I think pray for the people of Nigeria, but for the persecuted church in China. In China today, there are Catholic bishops under house arrest, Protestant pastors in jail that plundered Tibet. 130 Tibetan monks have poured kerosene on their bodies to protest the Chinese government. The Uyghurs are being persecuted. In Vietnam, the Christians are being persecuted. The Buddhists are being persecuted. And you know, I'm going to end with a commercial. President Reagan, to bring this back to where we began, President Reagan said that the words in the Constitution and the words in the Declaration of Independence were a covenant. You know, a covenant is stronger than a contract. He said that covenant was not only for the people in Philadelphia, my hometown of Philly, in 1776 or 1787. He said it was a covenant with the entire world. That covenant is being shredded, and we as Republicans ought to be reestablishing the Reagan covenant, whereby we advocate for human rights and religious freedom. And lastly, we're beginning to reach a point that we're going to lose religious freedom in our own country. Thank you very, very much.